Up next, we have a final panel for the Webstore Wizardry track before we move on to Ad Insights. And this panel will be headed by Conor from Aghanim, and he'll be joined by Chloe from Neon, Matt from Digital Turbine, Liam again from Tebex, and Archie from Stash. So give our wonderful panelists a lovely round of applause, please.
Everybody's got a mic. My name is Conor McLaughlin. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of Aghanim. Aghanim is, I'll just give a quick introduction. Today's not really about me though, so we'll go on to the panelists pretty quickly. Aghanim is a game extension and publisher enablement platform and a community hub that is kind of revolutionizing the direct-to-consumer space with the performance to prove it. And again, not about Aghanim today, it's about the rest of our panelists up here, so if you would like to speak to me after, I would be happy to do so. But let's get to the main event. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Doing great.
Good, thank you.
Great.
Good. Okay, so I think it'd be great for everybody to introduce themselves. I'm very familiar with Archie here. I've been on several panels with him. However, I haven't met the rest of you, and I think it'd be great if everybody in the room knew everybody here. So go ahead. You want to start at the end?
So hi, very pleasure to be here. I'm Chloe, head of Growth at Neon. So you just saw Liu, our head of customer success, with one of our amazing developers here. So what we do is we are a D2C commerce platform, and my job is to work with amazing gaming developers out there, and I'm really pleased to share the stage with you all.
Yeah, my name's Liam, so I'm the VP and GM at Tebex. There's going to be a bit of a thread among some of the panelists here. So we act as an extension of gaming studios, enabling D2C monetization across kind of mobile and PC, cross-platform, and in particular with an interest in games as platforms, UGC enablement, and those sorts of things. So yeah, great to be on the panel, and over to you.
Yeah, Matt Tubergen with Digital Turbine. We've actually been around for a long time working on direct-to-consumer, but direct-to-consumer for us is not just payments, it's actually been working on distribution. So we partner with carriers and operators around the world to create alternative opportunities for Android to be modified to help partners like yourself. So excited to be here today. Thank you.
Yeah, Archie, I spoke a little earlier. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Stash. We're a D2C platform business. We build end-to-end solutions for direct distribution, engagement, et cetera, for games on mobile and PC.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I'll go to my first question. So we've all talked about direct-to-consumer for many years. I think it feels like a much more hot topic today than it felt back in 2024. Can you guys speak a little to why that is and where you see the industry going over the course of the next 12 months?
Happy to go first. I mean, from our perspective, we've been working with a lot of app developers over the years that are providing alternative APK versions, alternative billing versions. We're one of the largest distributors of Android applications around the globe. So we've seen this firsthand, but I think that, honestly, I think kind of momentum will get momentum. Everybody's seeing the Epic, service and what's going on with Epic and how it's exciting. But I think even if we look at like Playtika and Moon Active and some of these other companies that are starting to announce public numbers, there's been a tremendous amount of momentum. I remember there was a panel 2 years ago. There was like one guy talking about D2C, and it was like, oh, this is cool. This is going to be great. Now we're starting to see multi-billion, dollar budgets move, or revenue, controls move from, one pocket to the next. And I think that's providing a lot of momentum here. To me, it's dollars speak in this one.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I think on the one hand, you've had some companies leading the charge, showing what's possible, especially some of the publicly traded companies, which has been nice. You can see what they're achieving. And then there's also been a lot of unlocks in what players can, or what developers can do. I spoke about this a lot earlier, but there's been various regulatory movements that have made it possible for developers to do more and more things, to distribute directly. That's just facilitated a whole set of new products like link outs. I also think that the reduction in the value of organic discovery on app stores, I think a lot of the fallout from IDFA left the industry at a place where, one, there was much more of an incentive and impetus to capture as much margin as possible because things got tighter, and there was much less of a feeling that you're getting a lot of bang for your buck with app store distribution.
Yeah, so one of the most important from the past 12 months is previously, before Epic and Apple settlement, it was more like for core titles, and then, you know, feels like it was like privileged to them. But since then, it's like for all kinds of genres, and then every genre can have the potential to actually work on their D2C strategy, and then, you know, to achieve the potential.
And also, I mean, just to add to that as a final point, that I think the other thing that maybe we don't always think about is that the regulatory kind of news and all the headlines, yes, it's been interesting to us as professionals and studios, but gamers are seeing this as well. So they're becoming more natively aware of the possibility of kind of out-of-bound purchases, web shops, those sorts of things, which then, you know, it just starts that flywheel spinning.
Great. Let's stay on regulatory developments, because that's really exciting right now and a little bit interesting in terms of the risk that it provides, right? So can you guys talk a little bit about what you believe will happen with the external content links program, alternative billing program from Google, what iOS and Apple's kind of response will be, and how you plan at each of your organizations to navigate your publisher partners around these constant erratic regulatory changes to keep them compliant?
I can take that, because I just gave a talk on it. So what's really, you said that there's a lot of excitement and like interest, and I think what you were touching on there is that for the first time, I think we now are in a position where regulatory changes could be bad for game developers comparatively. So until last year, the status quo was like the app stores didn't let you do anything, and so any regulatory change was in a good direction. Now, that's still the case in most of the world, with the one exception being in the US, where you've had this 6-9 month period of pretty much unrestricted link outs, first on iOS and then Android. And now what we're seeing in the US is that those programs are under appeal, both from Android and Apple in different ways. So what you mentioned there with the external content links entitlement, is it? Yeah, that's the Android policy. So Android have now tried to update their policies in a way where they're asking developers who are doing link outs to now opt into a program that will be like an officially sanctioned link out. And that will, if it stands, come into effect on January 28th. The thing is, though, that that policy is not compliant with the currently standing US court order that Android is under. So this is one situation where the status quo is more beneficial to developers, and Android is currently appealing that court order, and then as kind of a scare tactic a little bit, they're trying to ask developers to sign up for this program in anticipation of that being allowed. That court hearing will happen on January 22nd. I think who knows whether or not the court will allow this to go into effect. They seem pretty skeptical of it. The judge in that case seemed very skeptical of it. So I think it's very, very likely, as likely as it, or not, that this is not allowed to go into effect. But certainly Android is trying to take really aggressive action to stamp down on link outs. I know that was a lot, so I'll pause there.
We'll find out tomorrow, right? Because hearing's tomorrow.
Get an indication. I think it could be some time before we get this. This is why it's somewhat curious timing that Android have said basically developers, if you're linking out, you need to sign up for this by the 28th, which is curious timing because I don't think we'll get clarity on whether or not this is a legal policy by then. But the court hearing is, yeah, it's on the 22nd, I thought. So, you know, this week on, but I don't know if we'll hear immediately.
Yeah. Very interesting. It also, in my opinion, it also kind of leans towards, if I'm a publisher, right, and I'm trying to monetize, and I have my own front end or my own kind of solution for direct-to-consumer web shops. You mentioned Playtika earlier. I think now is kind of the time where you want to kind of evaluate whether or not it makes more sense to go with an external vendor who's on the cusp at all times of constant erratic regulatory change, right? Because, you know, you build out this internal team, you build out direct-to-checkout on Android, it takes you months to do so. Suddenly, there's this regulatory change that just comes through, you don't know that it's coming through, and then you have to revamp your entire internal strategy for Q1 into Q2, when really what you could do is partner with somebody who's an expert who sees these changes coming. What do you guys think about that? And are you advising your partners to kind of take on more of that external consult?
Yeah, so of course there is the different approaches, right? So if you're a bigger company, enterprise company, you want to have the full control. Of course, you can have different teams. You can be your merchant of records. But if you are a smaller company, then the best option is to work with your providers because they have all the resources. They negotiate with the PSPs for you. They take care of the compliance fraud for you, and you don't have to worry about anything. And also, they have the volume, right? So they get to negotiate the better rates for you as well. So they have all the knowledge, and you just need to work with them and then be open with it. And also, like my colleague Lou mentioned in the previous session as well, there will be a lot of changes, and we just need to be adaptable. Just look at the long-term DTC strategy, have a web shop, have direct checkout, and if there is any changes in any region, then be adaptable. But if you have a web shop, then you always have an option.
Yeah, it's very much like Archie said, isn't it, in your talk the other a few minutes ago, having that fallback that we know is covered globally. Yes, by all means, take advantage of the other possibilities. Have direct link outs. Have all these things. Have an in-game web shop. Whatever. But don't neglect the fallback, and don't neglect that kind of default position. That again, once you educate those players into this kind of new mindset of, hey, actually, this web shop is a place to go to get good value, not just a place to go because I have to. That kind of really changes the game, in the event, which we know is going to happen, that these regulatory sands keep shifting.
Yeah, and I think Conor totally agree with everything that's been said, and I think one of the things you were getting at in your question was that in the US, where we've been, is where you've been able to do these link outs. That's a pretty simple developer implementation and a pretty simple user experience, because it's just clicking a link and then you open a web page, and there's certainly optimizations to be done there to improve conversion, lower friction, et cetera. But that value proposition, funnily enough, is kind of, it's debatable to the extent to which we're adding, the most value as providers there. I think Stash adds a ton of value there, but I think certainly I've heard from developers, well, if it's that simple, I don't see why I need to work with an external provider, et cetera. Whereas with web shops, and I know Aghanim, really invests in this, and so does Stash in particular. We both believe our role is to really grow D2C adoption, and Stash's feature set really doesn't focus that much on just the payment flow, right? The feature set really focuses on the loyalty systems, the engagement systems, et cetera, that really are meant to attract users to D2C channels to keep them coming back. And so that value proposition is much more acute when you're in a world where you don't just have that simple link out. So we are working with developers to prepare that. Like I gave a talk about this a little while earlier, and basically setting up, at least two models, one being the link out model, and you deploy that wherever you can, and then the fallback being, not using links or in-game messages to steer users to external payment channels, but to instead, just go back to a world like we were in before 2025, where, you have to find other channels, other ways to get players into D2C channels. I think it's TBD whether or not it will be worthwhile for developers to actually sign up to these programs. We're currently advising our developers to adopt more of a wait-and-see posture. Don't be the first to sign up. In general, when you look at the precedents in Europe, it's not been worthwhile to sign up for these, because the fees basically are too high to justify the adoption uplift you get. But yeah, I think we'll see once a few other developers hopefully test that out.
In the event that, and this is kind of what we're thinking about now at Aghanim, in the event that iOS direct-to-checkout, Android direct-to-checkout, direct-to-store is all by the time of Q3, the fees that are introduced make it kind of not worthwhile for publishers to proceed with. What channels and what strategies are you starting to think about at your separate organizations to help players and publishers still take advantage of the web shop idea without being able to link out directly from in-game to those destinations?
Sure.
Go ahead. No, I think there's maybe a little bit of a point here where it's very clear that there's going to be a bifurcation of publishers who publish on Google Play and using Google Play services, and publishers who are going to publish outside of Google Play on Android. And right now, publishers who are publishing on Google Play are obviously paying a bunch of money for that. Google said, hey, listen, great, we're going to allow you to publish on Google Play and use an alternative payment. You guys have a lot of those alternative payment services. Awesome. Very cool. But guess what? Publishers still are going to have to pay a bunch of money to Google to do that. And the Google's saying, hey, listen, great, we're going to now allow you to publish on Android or outside of Google Play. But however, they have yet to fully announce it, we're going to start restricting Google Play services. So then what does that mean for developers to be able to publish outside of Google Play and Google Play services where they're not paying a whole bunch of money either with payment rails or Google Play's payment rails? And so I think there's a world right now where there's going to be a lot of kind of angst and concern around publishing outside of Google Play and using Google Play services. At least at Digital Turbine, we've got a pretty specific roadmap in helping developers basically leverage other services on Android to be able to meet the needs. And by the way, it's not just meeting and being comparable to Google Play or as soon as Apple opens up, but actually there's a lot of innovation that's going to take place. Maybe not right now, but during 2026 and 2027. So what does that mean? If you're a developer, right now, raise your hand right now if you have a Mac laptop and you download an application on the Mac App Store, right? Isn't it weird how you can go on your Mac laptop and download an application directly from the web and use whatever payment rail you want, but on your mobile phone you can't? You have to go through an app store? It's kind of weird. And so we believe that there's going to be a world soon where there's going to be all sorts of services that innovate in a world like Mac operates today versus how mobile operates, and that's where we're focused.
Can I just ask, so this is a very interesting topic, and I completely agree. I think this is where a ton of the innovation is yet to take place. Why do you think, given that this hasn't been possible on Android for forever, why do you think it hasn't taken off in a huge way, in the West at least?
Yeah, so I think it's a couple things. It's based, at least from a Digital Turbine perspective, we build Android services. So part of Android services for operators and OEMs. And that means basically system level software that helps carriers and OEMs and app developers distribute their applications. The way the software works, there's not a lot of companies out there creating things that are basically Android level services. And so I think as those services start to come available, DT has a bunch, like we can install an application on a user's phone without going through an app store and without all the scare screens. It's completely compliant, it's certified, it's great, but it's taking time for...
What kind of services are these?
Yeah, so it's actually install services. We got a product that's called Single Tap.
Updating.
Yeah, app downloads, app updates. It can all happen, just like the example we talked about with Apple, with an Apple laptop and an Apple application. We can do that on Android today, and we've been doing it for years. It's just the interesting part of it, at least from our side, because we actually come from the opposite side. There haven't been all these great payment rails inside these applications, so therefore, there hasn't been this really big, strong need for developers to say, let's go and focus on direct distribution and direct to consumer. Now that that's starting to take place, I think everybody's put the focus and energy on how do we optimize for payment rails, when we believe that that's a huge piece of it. Of course, check the box, that's better economics. But the innovation is going to come building these alternative services for distribution, of which, again, if you feel free to talk afterwards, if you'd like to go through it. But it ties back to Android and the operating system as it starts to evolve away from Google Play services and Google.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, exactly that. It's going to be, a lot of these opportunities are definitely there, and I completely agree. I think kind of going back to the original question as well, that, these changes are going to happen, and, there are situations where the move is going to be quite sudden, where suddenly on such and such a date, a rule is going to change. And for us, we kind of split it into two core pillars. So there's the awareness pillar, and then there's the education pillar. And so the awareness pillar is exactly that. It's like, how do you make players aware that the web shop exists? And that can be, again, we're a big proponent of building your community and owning your community as much as possible. And certainly, where you have these opportunities to do direct link outs, don't just use that as an opportunity to make the payments and make the extra margins and whatever else. Use that as a chance to build your fan base. Use that as a chance to build your wider community, be that kind of email, forums, because, if you're a certain age like me, Discord, whatever that might look like for you. Likewise, if you have fans, you have influencers, YouTubers, Twitch streamers, get them obviously directing players to the web shop as opposed to kind of in-game purchases. Use things like creator codes. And then that comes on to the education piece, right? Where, once people are aware, you need to almost make it muscle memory that, the default is no longer the IAP. The default is use the web shop. And again, creator codes, people who feel they want to support, a particular streamer, a particular YouTuber they really like, that's an incentive for them. Providing kind of those free, daily rewards, but making it on the web shop. So it's building that muscle memory of every day, going to the web shop, claiming your item, going through the steps to get it. So that, by the 7th, 8th, however many times, you start to notice other things. You go, oh, actually, that looks interesting. But at that point, you're already familiar with the whole process. You know how it works. You're not learning it for the first time because you've done it in a zero-risk situation multiple times. I think it's that kind of build awareness and then build that muscle memory.
Yeah, I think, Conor, your question was about like what strategies are we using to scale channels in the absence of direct link outs. It's funny, we made an ebook back, we released it in May 2025 called How to Scale Your Web Shop. It was a really amazing ebook. We released it in the wrong month because that was the month that the Epic v Apple thing came out, and everyone was like, okay, well, but it has these tremendously creative workarounds. So we were kind of returning to that thinking, and fortunately, all of our web shop tech is built around that. And I think, I roughly split it down into kind of, okay, there's two surfaces. There's what are you doing in the app, and there's what you're doing outside of the app. So in the app, you're doing two things. The first thing you're doing is you're acquiring out-of-app communication channels. You're getting emails. You're asking players to sign up for, Discord groups or Facebook groups, et cetera. And the second thing you're doing in-app is linking to non-commercial engagement functionality, loyalty programs, other reward systems, blogs, depending on your game, community systems. So you're linking them to, D2C channels that aren't necessarily commerce-based. And then there's out of app, and out of app, I think your framework was great about awareness, education, et cetera. And then we also think about, okay, you have what are you doing in app, what are you doing out of app, and then what are you doing on channel? And on channel is like in your D2C channel, how are you building a habit to bring players back again and again and again? Are you offering daily rewards? Are you offering, content drops every month that they come back and visit? And so I think you have to think creatively about the problem, but there's certainly a lot of solutions, and a lot of them are tried and tested. So there's tremendous precedent of us scaling web shop channels north of 50%, just web shops without steering. So, you really can reach high numbers through these strategies.
Yeah, just to add that, because when you are new and looking at your D2C strategy, you probably will look at as a payment project, but it's actually more than that. It should be your player journey project. So you need to think about how you would like to bring your players from your game to your web shop, and then from the shop and then back in game. So think about that. And of course, like panelists said here, so it's about your social channel platforms around it at the same time. There is actually an opposite example. Remember like 20 years ago when a lot of commerce brands, they were used to websites, right? And then they were trying so hard to bring their users from websites to apps. And then there were like different promotions, discounts, and then try to build trust. And now mobile developers are doing the opposite because their players probably a lot younger than us, and they grew up with mobile games. They probably don't even have a laptop yet. So now we are trying to basically bring them back to the web shop. And that's just very interesting to see that that's happening in reverse.
Yeah, I think the really interesting thing that we're finding at Aghanim is that second purchase conversion is upwards of 97%. Yeah. So going back to what you said about just like making sure that the journey feels familiar, getting players to second purchase means third purchase, fourth purchase, fifth purchase, those happen. It's just about getting over the hump on first. So, and it was very funny what you said about bringing back everything that we used to be thinking about in May 2025. I heard you, email marketing, user acquisition retargeting, creator-based marketing. So it's very interesting that we're there again.
Can I make one note, which is that one thing that's notable is even where we've entered this world in which you have these like taxed in-app link outs. So like, like in Europe with the DMA, or what Android's proposing in America, where they're asking you to opt into a link out. So even where that's the case, and we don't think the link outs are worth it, the removal of anti-steering policies there still applies to the messaging. So to your point, previously you weren't even allowed to talk about web stores within your game, but almost always in countries where you have these link out entitlements, you're still allowed to talk about the web shop within the game without paying fees or opting in, so long as you're not directly linking out. And that's huge because prior to 2025, you weren't even allowed to mention web stores or inform users about them. So that's a small win, but it's a nice one.
It's a nice one. It's a nice one. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about how publisher perception of web shops and direct-to-consumer has changed. So do you believe that most publishers that you guys are speaking to now, that you guys are having calls with and meetings with, they no longer consider direct-to-consumer to be an experiment? They consider it to be a must-have. Would you agree with that statement? Why not?
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely from our side, kind of, you know, a lot of the studios we're talking to, it is very much a, you know, we know we need it, we know we want it. It's not an experiment, and I think, you know, a lot of that again is. It's that common bell curve, isn't it? You know, we've kind of had the early adopters, and we've seen kind of the, you know, as you said, the big headlines on the big numbers, and that's drawn this awareness and this attention. And I think, you know, the fact is getting regulatory kind of insights as well removes, as much as in some ways it muddies the waters, because there are so many different rules and so many different kind of, you can do this in this country and can't do this in this country. The fact that it's being recognized as, you know, it almost has that legitimacy. Whereas, you know, we had conversations a year ago, and even though, you know, like you quite rightly said, you could have a web shop, and as long as you weren't steering, wasn't really a problem. But we still had a lot of people going, yeah, but I'm still scared of pissing off Apple and Google. Understandably, because, you know, that's your dinner at the end of the day. But I think because of these regulatory changes, and because actually, you know, a lot of the, you know, governments and courts and you know, and regulators in different countries are recognize this, and so, you know, adding that legitimacy effectively, you know, the studios are now going, well, okay, we still might need to be careful about the specifics of how, but the general concept we know, you know, we should be doing, and actually, you know, is a legitimate thing to be doing.
There's some variation by genre, but I think 100% for more, you know, mid-core casino genres, you know, really high monetizing ones there, it's like everyone's doing it, and almost all the conversations we have with developers are like, look, we have a channel, it's performing okay, we want to take it to the next level. Still, for kind of casual games, hyper-casual, hybrid casual, like there's still earlier sentiments there. You haven't seen the match games in particular jump fully into this, so that we're having conversations with them. I'm sure you guys are as well. There, I think it's still viewed a little more experimentally in like casual with especially puzzle. But among the other genres, like yes, you know, you've been late if you've been doing this for a year. You've been, you know, already quite late.
Yeah, I think 2 years ago it was like, should we do it? But now it's like, how do we do it, right? And the other element is the shift in the popular of the genre. So the past 2 years, a lot of the casual genre studios, they have shifted to like IP-driven titles, right? So when your games rely on IP, then it makes more sense to have a web shop or have a proper D2C strategy.
Great. And in terms of, I want to go back quickly to direct to checkout, but from a performance perspective. Have there been any situations that you guys have encountered at your respective companies where direct to checkout has not backed out from a conversion perspective to the point where you expected it to be a serious net revenue gain?
So no.
No.
I think what you're referencing there is like, okay, if you look at the side-by-side of link out checkout versus IAP, you can say, all right, IAP will always be the most convenient, lowest friction channel. You know, and to some extent, you know, that is just true. I think we've gotten at Stash as good as you can possibly get. But like a lot of developers have to be comfortable with the idea of some drop-off in overall conversion through web channels. Or they should at least be comfortable with that, so long as it offsets, so long as the net revenue gain more than offsets that drop-off. So I've never seen a scenario in which that drop-off is so significant that it's just not worth it. I have seen scenarios whereby product teams are incentivized on the wrong metrics here. And so developers I know have been experimenting with this have seen a scenario where, let's say you're getting like a 3% drop-off in conversion on your web-based checkout funnel versus your in-app checkout funnel, and the product team's incentives are purely on gross revenue. So, because what they're looking for is like, you know, the individual player transacts this many current purchases at this amount. And so the product team's incentives are totally misaligned with the overall business's incentives. So they've been very nervous about jumping full bore into, you know, kind of web-based checkout, which is a problem with game organizations. They need to reorient their teams from thinking about gross player LTVs to net player LTVs, like urgently, because you know, those teams could be like basically, you know, they could be forgoing the opportunity to have a 15 to 20% revenue boost in favor of a kind of gross revenue 1% increase, because that's where they're incentivized. But the bottom line is, you know, seeing, you know, 20% less profitability. Super, super important issue right now, I think, in the industry.
Yeah, definitely. And just to extend on that, and it's kind of slightly adjacent to the question, but I think it's probably an important message, and I'm sure everyone here would agree. Kind of as a bit of a PSA, I suppose. The other thing that we have seen is, I know, all of us on this panel and everyone else out there works really hard with these studios and these app developers to go, look, to make the most of it, you need to do these things. You need to draw that awareness. You need to build that education. You need to do all the things that we've been talking about. And yet, and I'm sure we're probably not the only company that's had this, you'll have someone that goes, well, we've built, we've got this web shop now. Why is no one using it? And it's like, because you've not put the miles in. You've not put the legwork in. You can't just build it and people will automatically start using it. I wish they did. It would make our lives a heck of a lot easier. I think that's fair to say, right? But it's very important. If you're going down this route, you have to put in kind of the miles to build that awareness, to build that community, to drive players to the web shop, give them reasons to do it and build that muscle.
I don't know what you're talking about. Every staff.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah.
It's like players use it.
I mean, maybe the contrarian's position is because we our partners integrate with all you guys and a lot of other partners. I think it depends on who you ask the question inside the organization. To your point, if it's a chief product officer, you may be crushing your metrics. Yep, check the boxes. If you're asking the CMO is saying, wait a minute, is my return on ad spend the same? And by the way, that's driving a lot of decision making across the organization. So I still think if 2026, if there was like the goal for developers in this room and in the event here, focusing on how to drive profitable ROAS is going to be the biggest lightning rod aspect of this whole thing as we get into this year and past this year. But it's not just I agree with you. Net value, hands down, no issue. That's that's check that box. But trying to get attribution working, trying to make sure that you can properly process payments and properly run a marketing campaign against your UA when 50% plus the users are being are paid users for any given developer at any point, at least at the top grossing level. That's going to be the metric we got to crush this year.
Yeah, so D2C, right, direct to consumers. So we need to think about we need to put the players first. We need to serve them as a purpose. That's why we have a D2C strategy in place. And you just need to put them first and think about what value they can get when you're actually trying to get them to pay through direct checkout. Then you need to build trust, explain to them why they need to, if they pay through direct checkout, they get more value, and then they will understand why. Once you have the trust, then you should see the positive impact from doing this.
Great. And in terms of positive impact, right? Let's talk about what performance metrics you're looking for at your respective companies to drive success. Like, what does success mean with direct-to-consumer? You hear the metric revenue moved off app. There's a lot of other metrics. There's increases in ARPU. There's impact on net revenue. There's impact on gross revenue. All are possible. What are you guys looking at in terms of we've reached a successful milestone, and when can you celebrate with your publisher partners for finding a strategy that's worked?
So I can just start at Stash. So at Stash, like our most important metric as a company, and I'm always transparent with developers when we start talking to them, and we say, if we're successful, we're looking at like D2C adoption as a share of revenue. So that's what percentage of your revenue is going through a D2C channel. And that's always our number one metric. And I almost always then identify, a couple other metrics we want to support. So for example, our loyalty program is built specifically to drive traffic and spend into the direct channel. That's what it's optimized towards. That's what its rewards are calibrated for. That's how it's designed from a UX perspective. But of course, you can also tweak it to have secondary benefits, whether that's to retention, to organic growth, to spend depth. Like, yes, certainly those are things you can use the web to achieve. But you should always be, I think, crystal clear that like the D2C functionality benefit, and this is something I have to kind of sell to customers we work with and just show them the math that like, if nothing else, this loyalty program, all it does, keeps spend the same, but shifts $1 from here to there, that's made you 25%. And like, there's basically no product metric I could improve that will increase your net revenue by 25%. So I think you've got to be clear that's your number one. And then you also do have any other secondary metrics you can support. But I will also highlight there's other kind of strategic benefits that you're getting from your direct channels. So a good example for web-based direct channels that we love to work on with our partners is this idea that these can be testing grounds. Web-based functionality is far easier to build and ship at a fast cadence. We work with our developers to build very custom interfaces, and so a lot of them want to use the web to test out concepts that might be quite expensive and costly and difficult to implement fully natively in engine. Whether that's a new mini game, we've done that with one customer. We launched a new monetizable mini game that made them tens of thousands of dollars in the week it was up. Or a new interface design. We worked with a developer that wanted to test out new menu designs for its shop. It had added a lot of offers, and it was like, oh, we're thinking about moving to a tab-based navigation model in our shop. So we just tested that out in web before we rolled it out in game. So there's a ton of other kind of benefits, data collection, et cetera, that you gain. But number one, we're always looking at percent of revenue. Yeah.
Yeah, same here as well. I think revenue is definitely the top metric. But also there's other things to look at. Well, back to the value that we can provide the players. So it's like you can just tell how much love that you get from your players, right? And then if they come visit your web shop very frequently, and then they love your game. And then after they purchase the items, what they do? They go back to the game and play more games. So indirectly, you would probably get more advertising revenue as well. So all in all, that should be considered. So there are different metrics, and then deep down, it's all tied to the value that you give your players.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's safe to say you can't take any single metric in isolation, right? I mean, one of the big ones that we look at, and obviously we talked about slightly earlier, is repeat purchases, because you can drive players once, and if they don't find the experience worthwhile, they won't do it again. I think it's safe to say we wouldn't consider that a successful kind of D2C experience. But you could also, if you looked at that as your only metric, you could gamify that and be like, well, okay, we'll make everything $1. Then people are going to come back. But then you've lost a crap ton of revenue. So I think you have to look at kind of multiple. I think revenue, obviously, at the end of the day is key for us, combining that with returning customers. Because again, like we said, once you get to that second or third purchase, the conversion rate becomes almost automatic. So definitely kind of that is our kind of second big one.
If I could just clarify that, when you say revenue, so when I was describing revenue, I'm specifically talking about share of D2C adoption. And the reason we focus on that so much in Stash is that's what we can control. That's what our product delivers. And so across seasonality, across declines, increases in your game's performance, any other adjustments you're making to your game, the thing that Stash promises you to deliver, and that we are entirely in control of within reason, is what percentage of adoption are we getting.
Great. And in terms of what you're offering players to essentially transact off app, what have you found to be the best strategies for bonus, discounts? At Aghanim, we have cashback reward points. We have various different other engagement levers where we can link to various different destinations. What have you found works the best in terms of strategies for getting players off app to checkout or to web shop to then checkout?
There's no one answer. I would say do A/B testing. It's always good to have free claims when you try to redirect players to your web shop for the very first time, right? And then after that, you can introduce daily streaks, so they would come back to your web shop. They would be like, oh, what's today? What's the free items that I can claim? And then, and we also find if you offer better value, it's better than discounts as well. But then every game is different, and then your players, do A/B testing, and trust the data.
I love this question. So this is something we've invested a lot in. Our loyalty program is oriented around this. So we separate rewards into two categories. There's kind of rewarded engagement, which are the traffic drivers. You're trying to create that habit of repeat daily engagement. So that's weekly rewards, daily rewards. Streaks are super effective there. And then there's spend-based incentives. And for spend-based incentives, we have a loyalty program structure that's got its unique implementations across games, but is generally extensible. And the first thing we do is we make sure all of our incentives are structured at the per dollar spend level. So we separate them from the catalog design. We basically say, okay, assume you have the same catalog. Of course, you do add web exclusive offers, but really think of those incentives as every dollar a player spends, they get some amount back. We offer 3 of those incentives to players based on each dollar. The first is your core currency. Every game is a core hard currency, so we give let's say five gold per dollar. The second is loyalty program XP and progression, which progresses you through a series of milestones. And then the third that you claim rewards at gives you access to various tiers, you get benefits at. And then the third is a web exclusive currency that you can spend on the web. And what that does is it creates a sense of intrinsic motivation to progress through these web loyalty programs. And it also allows you to perfectly calibrate your rewards to the amount of adoption you're shifting. So you know that for every dollar you're giving away, you're getting X amount back in adoption. And so, all of that is perfectly triangulated to ensure you're kind of maximizing your generosity.
It also keeps your players loyal and sticky, right? Coming back, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, guys, 9 seconds. I mean, I was gonna do some questions, but I think we're out of time. Charlie's glaring at me over there. Can we take one question? If there is one question. I think we covered a lot. That was pretty
Thanks,
extensive.
everybody.
Stunned
Good job.
silence.
Thank you so much, Conor. That was great.
I knew exactly what you were asking.